So yes, you don't have to look very far to research and articles that are predicting that this region will become uninhabitable this century. But also, I came across papers that said by 2050, this will be an unlivable region.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Climate Emergency Forum. My name is Regina, and I'll be leading you through this discussion. Climate impacts, the Mediterranean and North Africa. We're taping today, the 5th of May, also known as Cinco de Mayo. So happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone who celebrates. And we are speaking specifically of a region that some of you have heard of, and maybe some of you haven't. This is often referred to as MENA. What does this stand for? It stands for Middle East and North Africa. Now, this is a very, very important region. There's so much going on. It covers a landmass area of over 11 million square kilometers. And like I said, there's a lot going on. I would say it's one of the younger regions of the world. What does that mean? There are many, many young people. If you hear about the West or certain parts of Asia, we've probably heard that it's very much an aging population. Well, the opposite can be said for MENA. And this also does comprise, because of the desertification of North Africa, this does comprise the southern parts of Europe. Now, I'm speaking specifically to southern Spain and also Portugal. So we always have turbulence when there's a lot of youth. I mean, sometimes it's been referred to as youthquake. Now, in the best of times, we've heard about the baby boomers, we've heard about Gen Z. When you have a lot of young people, and especially this is very particular to young males, when the environment, so to speak, is not good, it does not lead to good things. So we have a lot of complications. We have growing heat in this area. And we also have, as I mentioned, growing desertification and a lot of problems with water. So it's very important that this region be included in discussions. As many of you know, and I mean specifically climate discussions. So as many of you know, we attended the previous COP in North Africa, specifically Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh. And then the next COP is going to be in the Middle East, in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. This is no mistake. These regions need to have a say in the climate talks because they are going to be highly, highly affected. Now, they're being affected will, of course, affect the rest of the world. There's a tremendous amount of out-migration. And without migration, it can be very difficult if there's an extreme difference in culture. And we know that there is. We have already also seen a lot of impacts with water scarcity. Water scarcity is tremendous in this region. It affects everything and everyone. Down from education, half of humanity is female, a little more than half. It just so happens that females in these cultures are the ones who are supposed to collect the water. They're the water collectors. It's very arduous labor. And when there's less and less water, these women, these girls have to go further and further out to get the water, to bring it home, to cook and clean with, which means their chances of physical violence from men is much higher. It also means that the acquisition of an education is much lower. This affects them individually. It also affects these countries and these regions collectively, because when you have half of humanity that is not as highly educated as they could be and should be, they are less able to contribute to the benefit of these societies. There have also been many wars fought over the use of water. For example, many people have said that the genesis of the Syrian war was a war over water. So there are many, many implications for water alone, but we're going to look at other aspects that are confronting the Middle East and North Africa, and of course, Southern Europe. And I'm going to turn now to Paul, who will discuss the great heating that is happening in this area.
Thank you, Regina. So I've often talked about use the term climate casino. So this is definitely an area of the world that's very, very sensitive to climate change, to increased temperature specifically. So the projections, we know that the global average temperature is about 1.1 or 1.2 degrees Celsius higher than the baseline taken around the turn of the last century. So between about 1880 and 1910, if you take that average, we're about 1.1, 1.2 higher. Land surfaces are at least double that. The land is warming much faster than the oceans, of course. Also, high latitude regions are warming much faster, and high elevation regions are warming much faster. So basically, this region is warming about at least double the global average temperature rise. It's warming at twice that rate. And the Mediterranean, the sea surface temperatures in the Mediterranean and the temperatures of the water down through the water column have been increasing substantially as well. The Mediterranean is generally not that deep. And when the sea surface temperature, the water temperature reaches about 35 degrees or so, you can get 100% humidity around the coastal regions. And that basically is reaching the wet bulb temperatures for health. The human body just can't throw off heat when it's 100% humidity at those temperatures. That's a theoretical number. Actually, practically, the wet bulb temperatures of even 32 degrees Celsius are harmful to many people, especially older people and very young people. So the jet streams I've also talked ad nauseum about, and they tend to form a ridge pattern over the Mediterranean and over Southern Europe. And that gives very long-term heat waves and droughts. And when you get these situations, these are high pressure areas, you don't get much cloud cover. So all the solar radiation can come down and warm these cloudless regions. So essentially, you can think of it as the Sahara Desert basically is crossing the Mediterranean, if you like, and it's impacting Europe, southern Spain, and Portugal, and parts of the Middle East. So all of these things are making it much more difficult for people to work outdoors in these regions because of the health effects. And most of the work, is having to be done during the night when it's a little bit cooler. But the nights aren't cooling as much as they used to because of the very warm conditions of the Mediterranean oceans. This is definitely a hotspot for climate change. The water tables are dropping, so people have to dig deeper and deeper wells in order to extract water for crops and things. The vegetation is drying out on the surface. The soils are losing their fertility and being very vulnerable to windstorms blowing off topsoil and so on, which is further worsening the soil quality. Wildfires are becoming more prevalent in these regions. Reservoirs are drying up. And in Spain in particular, I was struck by some of the reservoirs that were actually human-made and storing vast amounts of water and covering up old cities. And there's a picture of this church steeple, this chapel, which is high and dry, well above the existing water level, and normally it's completely submerged, or at least maybe the very top is sticking out of the waters. So Spain is in great trouble. The Middle East is in great trouble. Many parts of these regions will essentially become uninhabitable as climate change continues to progress, and we're heading in to a very powerful El Nino situation, and that can add 0.2, 0.3 degrees onto the temperatures while that is occurring. So yeah, it's a pretty bad situation.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing up the additional factor of El Nino. My gosh, when you think things couldn't get worse. And any of you who may have been in North Africa or in the region that we're speaking of, even in the south of Spain, I must say, when I have been there many years ago, it was just tremendously hot. It's almost as if you could feel that Sahara heat bearing down on you. There's really no way to exaggerate this. And I'm wondering what the health implications might be, Peter.
I took some time to read up a little bit on the health aspects yesterday because I must admit I wasn't all that knowledgeable about it. And it came as a enormous shock. It's an absolute nightmare. And it is going to happen. We have a situation in this region of over 100 million people, and they are going to be hit by catastrophic climate change for a number of reasons that have already been mentioned. But we've got heat, we've got intolerable, unsurvivable heat, drought, crop failure, tropical diseases, of course. And then on top of all that, we've got conflicts and war. So for this region of over 100 million people, that is what they are looking at. I was very shocked that there was one paper looking at the extreme heat and the intolerable heat. And part of this will be the wet bulb temperature that we've done a program on once. And the reason for that is the Persian Gulf. So we get extremely hot temperatures. I mean, right now, you can go over there and fry an egg on your car. I can remember people telling me about that. But these temperatures, of course, are going to increase rapidly. There's even a feedback which is going to make the temperatures even worse, which is called the desert amplifying feedback. So yes, you don't have to look very far to research and articles that are predicting that this region will become uninhabitable this century. But also, I came across papers that said by 2050, this will be an unlivable region, largely an unlivable region. And you remember, and I mention often as I can, that the IPCC sixth assessment challenged us by saying at the outcome of the second assessment that we have to secure a livable future. So the situation that we're in worldwide is that we have to respond immediately as an emergency if we're going to have a livable world. That's what we're going to look at. But this particular region of over 100 million people are right at the top of this, or right at the bottom, however you want to put it. They are going to suffer terribly. They already are. We know that people are desperately leaving these regions, taking trips across the Mediterranean Sea in small boats and dying in order to get to regions that they may have some chance of having a decent life. Now there's another big irony of the situation in MENA, which is, of course, this is well, it used to be, and it still is almost, the number one region for the devil that is causing this, because the devil is called fossil fuels, and particularly oil and gas. So this region has massive development of massively more oil and gas. And they're going out in the Mediterranean, and they're drilling for oil and gas down there. They're going further into the desert. So what an ironic contradiction that there's more and more of this extraction of the fossil fuel evil, which is wrecking our planet and future already. So I make no apologies by calling this evil. And here's the horrible thing. We have millions of people that we know in this particular area I know now are extremely vulnerable. We've also always known that Africa is extremely vulnerable. And we've known it for decades. And yet what are we doing? We're doing anything about it? No, we're doing exactly the opposite. Our leaders, our corporations, our investment banks, our institutions, they are either driving or they are supporting the continuation of the fossil fuel industry. Whereas we could have a decent life, these people would have a chance at least, if we converted 100% of all fossil fuel energy and onto clean, renewable, everlasting energy. My final comment is that I had quite a shock yesterday when I realized that the IPCC, in fact, does not foresee and is not projecting the elimination of fossil fuels. Nothing like the elimination of fossil fuels. So, yeah, we thank you, Regina, particularly for proposing this topic. It's very sobering, it's very challenging, and we have to rise to that challenge.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's definitely a sobering topic. It is, of course, highly ironic that, here we are in the epicenter of where most of the oil is found in the world. And of course, this is sort of like, if you believe in karma, it's a karmic result, but it's highly unfortunate because, a lot of the workers who are working in this area, they have to work, as was mentioned, outside. The preponderance of kidney stones and kidney disease is just through the roof because these people just can't, the outdoor workers can't stay hydrated enough to protect the health of their kidneys. And if anyone, I've had a kidney stone, so if anyone has had any type of kidney disease, it is just agonizing. And end stage kidney failure is just not something that I would wish on anyone. So of course, there are many, many issues, from water, from the temperatures, from the health of the oceans to the health of humanity. This region has it all. And I also discovered a new word in looking up this region, and that is hydropolitics. And I found that to be quite interesting, that water is so incredibly important that by its very nature, it's embedded within politics of nations, because as we know, nations will, and absolutely in the future, much more will continue to go to war over water. It's going to be amazing. And I want to hear what you have to say about other issues as they relate to warming and temperature trends in the region, Paul.
Yes, thanks. So the Mediterranean, like I mentioned, the water temperatures are significantly rising throughout the water column, and the sea surface temperatures are much higher. So not only is there a lot more evaporation, which is raising the risk of wet bulb temperatures in any coastal regions around the Mediterranean, but there's also a fairly rare phenomena that's increasing in frequency. We have hurricanes or cyclones or typhoons, but we're also getting so-called metacanes, if you like, which is a version of a hurricane within the Mediterranean, which of course has severe impacts on shorelines that it impacts. And this has been quite a rare phenomena because of, it just doesn't have the distance to amplify, but because the water is so warm, and these storms are amplifying more quickly because of their, when you get sea surface temperatures over 26.5, and we're talking about some temperatures, in the low 30s in the Mediterranean. So if you get those temperatures near shorelines, then yeah, it's very difficult to work outdoors in a situation like that because people get heat stroke and heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and the body just, breaks down. Not able to cool itself, and you get sort of thermal runaway, if you like. And Peter mentioned that this is also a big issue for people living near the Red Sea or, any other bodies of water in that region. Spain, lots of people are kind of wondering, they've had ongoing drought for this April was as bad as any previous summer, I think, in terms of drought in Spain. And people are really wondering if they want, how much, whether they can be living there much longer. If they have some financial means, they'll be migrating to northern Spain probably to get away from some of these temperatures. So we're having real severe consequences right now. And, with a strong El Nino, they can worsen in the next few years significantly. So we're not talking about the future. We're talking about real-time sort of consequences to people living in this region right now. And of course, North Africa, we have the Sahara, but along the coastline of the Mediterranean, there's quite a few cities, in Africa on the coastline because they get this moderation cooling effect because they're on a coastline. But as the desert moves northward, and as the waters warm, then they're at great risk of having uninhabitable places, having to basically rely on air conditioning completely. If you go outside, you can only be out for very short periods of time. So this is a huge problem for this region. that is occurring now, not say in 5 years or 10 years. It's happening right now.
Thank you for bringing that up, because so many people talk about climate change and see climate change through the lens of the future. But as you say, it is happening now, and it has been happening. So it's just critical that we stop using the language of the future and really focus on what's happening now, because we can't live in this land of denial of someday. And of course, people have to move where it's livable. And again, this out-migration. I remember, I think I was in Spain, let's just say 15 years ago. There were a lot of people who had moved to Spain from Northern Africa, and it was just very difficult because totally different language, not able to work, many people having to subsist through illegal means. I mean, I myself had things stolen from me. So it was very difficult. And of course, this engenders hostility. And of course, then there's this never-ending cycle of strife between humans and humans. So yes, you've talked about the fossil fuel and the drilling for fossil fuel being, of course, the source of this, Peter. Do you have any other thoughts regarding this MENA region? And of course, that also includes the Mediterranean as regards to health or anything else.
Well, for this region, the more you look, the worse everything gets. In addition to all the other health problems that I went through, litany of impacts on health for population, particularly children, of course, particularly children. This is an area of very high poverty. It's probably the worst region for the extremes of wealth and extremes of poverty in the world, I would suspect, because World Bank says there are 50 million people in this region living on less than $2 a day, right? Or 17 or 20% of the population are already living in poverty. And that poverty is going to be it's going to increase. There's going to be more and more people living in poverty. This is the worst water-stressed region in the world. It's predicted to become the first region that, in effect, doesn't have enough water to live on. The heat will get higher and higher and higher. Their agriculture depends on irrigation. The more the irrigation, then the less groundwater they have. They're already losing groundwater big time. It is an absolute nightmare. But there's one other thing, and that is that it's not going to take a whole lot more for the health facilities services of this region to collapse under the strain of these multiple horrendous impacts of global climate disruption. And when that happens, everything's gone. Now, up to present, I read that the countries, some of the countries with some UN agencies, etc., they've done quite well in addressing the endemic chronic tropical diseases, those nasty diseases. But with climate change, they'll all come back and increase. And that includes infectious diseases. We've known, the infectious disease experts have known a long time that the higher the ambient temperature becomes, the more the diseases will proliferate. And in this particular region, they are predicting definitely, they say, new diseases to appear. One final thing, if that isn't horrendous enough, that we are seeing, or the people are seeing, diseases that make us think of horror, that are returning. TB, leprosy, even malaria is, which the people have done very well on. There's some papers that say that they need to worry a lot about return of malaria. So, I mean, it's an absolute horror show. It's an absolute nightmare. And this will visit all of us, by the way. The same things that are already making life next to impossible for the people in this region, right? None of us living anywhere are invulnerable to this. So I think it's a very good topic to bring up. It should elicit our horror and compassion, and we should all work extremely hard to compel all our governments to stop the ultimate evil of using our money to subsidize the fossil fuel industry to wreck our future even more and to ruin this wonderful, wonderful planet that I and other people have had the great fortune to live on. We got to stop the wrecking, guys. We've just got to force these people to stop.
Thank you so much, Peter, with those final words. It is a beautiful planet. It still is. It was a lot more beautiful before Industrial Revolution, but here we are. This is what we've done. And as you say, we have to get it together. I really appreciate speaking with you both. I think we've had a wonderful conversation. You know, this region comprises 11% of the world population. That's not insignificant. 1 out of every 10 person is from this region, the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa, and of course, Southern Europe, Mediterranean. So please, everyone, keep your ears to the ground regarding MENA. Pay attention, because whatever happens in MENA will happen in the rest of the world. It's going to define the future for all of us. We have to do all that we can to help people who are in this region and to help make this world a better place. So thank you so much for being with us. We always appreciate your being here. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions for people living in this region, or how we can look at making life more livable for people in this region, please leave them in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. We love getting new subscribers. So please subscribe if you haven't, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Climate Emergency Forum.